realized a ghost story told my own truth. True internet ghost stories wasn't my favorite pod, but I had nothing else to listen to. The gym demanded something to distract myself from the constant pain I was in on my quest to become the Quadfather, so TIGS was. I don't think they used that acronym, by the way, but how could I avoid it? It sounded adorable. The pod followed a basic formula. The host found an allegedly true scary story online and read it. He would add asides, comments like, "Did this really happen?" He'd say, without any irony, "So far this sounds so very true, but let's see where it goes, listeners." He called everyone listeners, except for his co-host, whom he called Fellow Traveler. She only talked in the beginning and end of the episodes, and they seemed to have some sort of complicated history, although I doubted it was romantic. Their chemistry was terrible. So after the first 5 minutes of discussing their respective weekends and plugging their Patreon, they began to read the post. I was on my second set of split squats when I started noticing something strange about the story they were reading. It seemed oddly familiar. As it continued, the details kept amassing, to a point where I was unable to, was a coincidence. It was describing something that happened to me, something I had never told anyone and had only gone through with one other person. But everything it was saying was wrong. I finished my exercises early, skipped the showers, and drove home in a rush. I listened to it again when I got back to the apartment, the story echoing around the walls from my smart speaker. When it finished, I listened again. Halfway through, I began to Google key phrases, trying to see where they had found this story. Nothing, nowhere, no hits. It wasn't online anywhere, or if it was, I couldn't find it. In the middle of a clawing, desperate anxiety, this drove me insane for some reason. Wasn't this allegedly from the internet? If it was, there should be some kind of trace somewhere. But instead, it was all dead ends. I Googled the pod and found an email where you could send comments about the show or submit a story. It could have been submitted, but then I thought of the host saying this story was brand new. There was no way this was just submitted because the only other person other than me who knew this story, the person whose viewpoint the whole story was from, they couldn't have sent the email in. My email to the pod was insane, partially caps locked, sent unedited in the context of an ever-escalating panic attack. I demanded information about where they got the story, who sent it in, their contact info, anything. I was surprised to get a response, although I guess the people who run a paranormal podcast are probably used to getting unhinged emails. They said they couldn't provide me any personal info but thanked me for being a fan and linked their Patreon. They said we are together on the roads. I read the email as the episode kept playing. It was entitled A Long Drive Home, and I listened again. I was in college, out of state, and I made friends with a guy in my dorm who it turned out was from around where I had grown up. I don't want to give details. I'm sorry if this is vague, but I'm not comfortable with it. For Thanksgiving break, I was going to fly home, but he told me a few weeks before he was going to drive back and asked if I wanted a ride. The flight was expensive, and this seemed a much better option. We both got along, lived on the same floor, saw each other pretty regularly. The ride was only 5 hours, not super long. We would split gas and avoid the airport lines. It felt like a win-win. Our last classes were at noon on Tuesday, so we decided to leave then. We'd make it back by 6 or 7 at the latest, depending on how often we stopped. I meet up in his room and we walk to the student parking lot. We had hung out a bunch as a group, but only a few times without anyone else. I was worried it would be awkward, but everything felt normal. We drove off, getting onto the interstate after 20 minutes of driving. We had eaten before leaving, hoping to save some time. The drive was uneventful for the beginning, listening to some playlist, then he put on a podcast. The pod was kind of weird. Some guy talking about how there are patterns in the world, and he travels back and forth looking for them. After a few minutes, I asked if we could listen to music again, and he said, just wanted to hear 2 more minutes. Even though it was cold outside, the car had started to feel warm. The sun was coming through the windows, and I was getting that overwhelmed, too hot in the car feeling. Vaguely nauseous, headache, the droning voice over the speaker didn't help. I remember the guy saying, you know you are on the path when the world outside the path begins to vanish. The signs you are seeking you. That's when he turned it off. Indie pop filled the car again, but there was too much treble. I chugged some water and coughed. He asked if I was okay. At the same time, we passed a sign for a rest stop in 2 miles. I said I was fine, but wondered if we could stop there. Sure, he said, no problem. 2 minutes later, we were there. The rest stop was desolate. 1 car parked at the far left of the lot, no one else. We pulled in next to the handicapped parking area and got out. I had been hoping the fresh air would make me feel better, but no go. I still felt overheated and anxious. He said he had to use the bathroom and walked over to the desolate-looking building. It had a low roof and was the gray, bruised color of storm clouds. Behind it, an overwhelming forest loomed. Something about the unending aspect of the trees began to overwhelm me. How could I tell if they were even real? There would be no way to tell if they just repeating images. One section of forest glitched, repeating infinitely. When they walked out of the bathroom, they went straight back to the car. I thought they would come over, say hi, be normal, but they didn't. I took one last look at the trees, hoping they would stop looking like, well, the way they were, but they still seemed eerie. Turning to walk away, I happened to glance at the park bench and see there was a drawing on it. A long red line, an arrow with points on both ends. Across the top, strange words, Latin I think, Quisque suas patamur mens. I should have seen that before. I remember thinking, I had been right here. I would have noticed a drawing. But I hadn't, because there wasn't anything there, I thought. But that was crazy. Things don't just appear, do they? He honked the car and I jumped. I looked back and I could only see his shadow behind the wheel. Stay calm, I thought, as I trudged across the grass, away from the trees and picnic bench. You're just weirding out. This is a normal day. Stop freaking out. I got in the car and we started to drive. The podcast was back on and I didn't say anything. He was completely silent, staring straight ahead. I closed my eyes, tried to relax. I hadn't gotten a lot of sleep the past few days because of midterms. Maybe I just needed a nap. I'd felt better, I thought. As I drifted off to sleep, I listened to the podcast. When we travel the roads, we think we are searching for answers. But what we must realize is that there are others who have been there before us, who are still there. When we go into the dark, they are waiting for us. And it is they who ride down the long roads. We are passengers. We are spectators. We are hosts. The words faded as I slipped into sleep. Weird dreams, confusing images. A graveyard where people buried themselves. A school where secret doors contained passages into strange wooded areas filled with wolves and what looked like vampires. An ancient lighthouse where I waited for the end of the world to come in from the sea. The car jerked to a halt and I woke up suddenly. My mouth was fuzzy and I was disoriented. Where are we? I asked. A rest stop, he answered. I needed to take a break. Okay, I said, yawning. He opened the door and walked out. I blinked and then saw where we were. A low-slung rest stop off the highway. One car in the distance. A picnic table. Never-ending woods. No, 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 I started muttering, panic in my voice. This isn't happening. This isn't real. It's a dream. Wake up, wake up, wake up. I screwed my hands into fists and banged my legs with them, scratched my palms with my fingernails. I had to do something to stop sleeping, stop dreaming. The podcast was still talking, even though the car was off. There are two worlds we know of, it said, the living and the dead. There are some who are in one or the other. Some are in both. We can move in each, but we must be careful. There are debts. I jumped out of the car. I didn't run to the trees. I didn't run to the building. Instead, I jogged across the parking lot to the car at the other end of the lot. The sun was low in the sky and it seemed to white, giving off a dull, shining glow like silver. Was it even the sun? It didn't feel like the sun. The other car was a black SUV with black windows. I saw myself reflected as I ran to it, but something about me looked wrong. I felt sick, suddenly nauseous. I stopped moving and waited. That's when I saw him come out of the bathroom. His shadow wasn't. I don't know how to explain it. The sun was above and in front of him, so his shadow should have been behind him. But it wasn't. It was in front of him, and it was stretching out across the pavement. Long and skinny and strange, like black tape, getting closer to me while he stood, watching. My heart bursting, I ran to the other car, slammed my hands against the windows, screamed for help. The car started. There was a whirring noise. The window came down. I was in the car, in the driver's seat. It was the car I had driven therein. The me in the car looked at me and whispered, "I'm sorry." And then the window closed and I fell down to the ground. I don't know what happened next or how it happened, but I was back at home. My mom said she ran out to the grocery store, and when she got back, I was there on the couch. I didn't ask any questions. I told her I was sock and went to my room. My phone was there, and there were a million texts and notifications. I started reading through them. They were asking if I was okay, if I had heard. They said the guy I had driven back home with had posted a suicide note and killed himself. I don't know what to do. That's why I emailed this. Because I don't think the person who died was really the person who drove me here. I don't think I'm the person I was, or maybe there's another me somewhere. I could swear I heard my voice downstairs a few minutes ago talking to my mother. That's how the podcast ends. All of it was wrong. First off, they were driving. I didn't have a car at school freshman year. They lived on my hall, and when we found out we lived close to each other, they offered me a ride home. And there was no podcast. We had a shared playlist, we played the whole there, and when only stopped once. We both used the bathroom, and I got out first. I do remember looking at the T's. I remember thinking they also Y looked like they repeated, but I didn't say that to them at all. I don't understand how they were saying that. The Latin phrase, I googled it, Quisque suas patem hermanas, it's from the Aeneid. It means we all suffer the same ghosts. I don't know what any of this means. The whole ride with them was weird. At some point I fell asleep, and it seemed like it was too long. I had these strange dreams, although I forgot them until now. I had seen myself in a car, driving with sunglasses on. I walked over to the car, and the me in the car took the sunglasses off. They had no eyes. Above me, the whole sky was white, and the clouds were blue, and the sun was a silver coin that stole all the heat from me. The ending is all messed up. I'm alive. I didn't die. I woke up in the car and we were in front of my house. Well, here you are, they said. End of the road. What about you? I asked. Are you close? No, they said. I have a long way to go. They drove off and I went inside. I thought everything was done. I said hi to my parents, played with the dog. My dad asked me if I made good time and I said decent. And then he asked me if I could move the car into the garage. I went out thinking he wanted me to move his car, but I was surprised to see the car I had just been in, out there on the curb. I walked over and saw no one in the driver's seat. Maybe for a second I thought I saw them, or a shadow. But then the clouds moved and I saw there was nothing. No one. I was holding a key fob, and when I clicked the button, the doors opened. I slid in, checked the glove compartment, registration and insurance card with my name. I grabbed my phone and saw our texts were gone. We weren't friends on social media. They were gone. Nowhere. The next few days were crazy. I thought I had gone nuts. People don't disappear. Cars don't just appear. All my memories weren't fake. They were real. I met them. I knew them. but no one else did. This was years ago, and I had finally sort of given up thinking about it, and then I heard this podcast. Everything they said was wrong, but I think they might have been telling the truth. I don't know what happened to them. I don't know what happened to me, but I don't know if I'm me. I keep thinking of those dreams and what they said about the two worlds. I think I was in the other one. My car is outside and I can see someone in it. They're in the driver's seat. I think they look like me. Maybe it's a shadow, a reflection. Maybe it's nothing. But maybe we're all only shadows, visible in some kinds of daylight, but not in others.